Good morning. Good morning, folks. This is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. It is June 25th and it is 10 a.m. And the commission had set aside this time this morning to gather amongst ourselves and talk and discuss and otherwise have an opportunity to advance the interest of the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission. We do not have an agenda. We're not taking public comment. This is just that opportunity for the commissioners to gather together and chat amongst themselves about things of relevance and importance. And so with that, it's fairly informal. We'll go by first names, and I note that all 5 of the voting commissioners are with us. We therefore have a quorum. A quorum is needed to do business, but we're not doing business, we're just chatting. So good morning, folks. Good to see you all. Good to see Julie with us as well. And I know we've got Mimi and Angelica as our hearings managers with us. I'll just open it up for topics of discussion. Does anybody want to lead off? This is me looking back and forth. Hey, Priya, go ahead.
Hey, I just had a couple of things. One in particular was, I wondered if we could just briefly follow up on the motion that we passed on Wednesday with respect to when we're hearing these various enforcement cases and you know, the way I think that we ended up setting it up. I wonder if there's still some value in establishing some criteria for the staff of like, you know, either, you know, these are the criteria that if you meet these, we want to hear it, you know, ourselves, or if the situation meets it, you know, we want to hear it. Or if none of those, you know, fit, but there's some other reason, you know, then they could sort of explain that in the order. But I was just kind of thinking that maybe there's a way to just put some framing around what we're having elevated to us. But again, wanted to open it up for discussion with others.
So opened for discussion amongst others. I also would look to Director Murphy or Julie in our informal stages this morning if she and or staff feel that additional criteria would be helpful, or are you, I mean, again, we're kind of building a ship as we're sailing it. Are you comfortable that staff is sufficiently understanding of the things that potentially ought to be elevated? There's no right or wrong answer to any of this in my opinion.
Can I kind of wax poetically for just a little bit around this?
Waxing poetic is awesome on a Friday morning.
Great, thanks. Maybe I should have had more coffee, but on the enforcement side, staff is going to continue, you know, for the most part, to work through AOCs, right? Try to get to resolutions that are then brought either, you know, to a hearing officer for review and then ultimately to the commission or directly to the commission. I think that this commission is really fully engaged and has a lot of questions. And so if we're going to like have a lot of questions, kind of bringing it straight to you all makes more sense to me than adding kind of 2 layers to it. So that's been some of the kind of process thinking that I have around trying to get some of these AOCs or OFEs directly to the commission instead of routing them through a hearing officer. But this ultimately really is a question of what is important for you all to take up as kind of the first reviewer of an OFV hearing, right? Like an order finding violation hearing, or of a negotiated order on consent that staff has negotiated with the operator in question. I don't know that actually answers any of your suggestions, Priya. As I said, it's kind of the different, I'm looking at it from a very process standpoint and wanting to make sure we get through the work, and that the work that staff and operators are doing in this context gets to you all at the right level to be responsive to what questions you have as you oversee the function of this organization and the regulation of this industry.
Yeah, thanks for that, Julie. I think, I was just thinking of it in terms of, as we were discussing it on Wednesday, at first I was thinking, anything that went to the level of an OFV, at least, but I think, I know I had asked about if there was past criteria for this. I think, Jeff, you also sort of mentioned that maybe there was some in one of the previous directors had established some additional criteria, like the amount of the fine, if it's above a certain amount or something like that. So those are the types of things I was kind of thinking about, and like a history of violations or violations above a certain level or that kind of thing. So anyway, those were just a few things that were swimming around in my mind, and I just wanted to get input from the rest of you. If nobody else feels that's necessary, then we can just keep proceeding as we plan. But to me, I thought maybe that it would both help the staff to be able to say, okay, it hits these boxes, so we're just gonna move it on up, or give them still the option of those instances when either they or of course the party themselves decides that they just want us to hear it for other reasons.
You're not alone on that, Priya. I as well would like to kind of understand what staff's thinking, and what the hearing officers are thinking in terms of their recommendations. I guess it's really staff making the motion for elevated to the commission. So maybe that's not something, Julie, that you're prepared to talk about, right away this morning, but it'd be something that I would like to have consideration for and to kind of understand, hey, here's the things that we are thinking about when we're evaluating that option.
So,
Jeff, this is Kyle, by the way. I'm sorry.
Hey, Kyle. Good morning.
Apologies for being late, and sorry my video is off. Where I am in Chicago right now, we do not have. I'm on my cell service, so I'm chiming in to just point out one that the
Kyle, your
process the commission has already authorized is for hearing officer orders. Hello?
Yeah, Kyle, you're not making it, unfortunately.
All right, let me try something different.
I think.
Can you hear
Kyle,
me now?
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, sorry about that. So the reason I was chiming in is to sort of clarify where we were procedurally on a couple of things. The commission authorized under standing order the hearing officer to enter orders that are binding on the parties after a motion from either staff or the operator, and providing some criteria to staff may provide some guidance to staff on when to file motions, but it's still ultimately the hearing officer's decision on how to rule on that motion. And then it's simply either the parties appeal it or the commission reverses it.
So
So
Kyle,
it's not necessarily a matter of, if you provide that guidance to staff, it may help staff understand when to file a motion, but it's still the hearing officer's decision.
Yeah.
yeah, and I just to clarify, I think I misspoke. I mean, I was thinking of it in terms of the hearing officer is really the appropriate level, so that if the hearing officer receives, this either from either party, either the staff or the other party, maybe there are criteria that if it hits all of those, then it definitely goes up to us, and it's not necessarily a decision called by the hearing officer. Because it hits those criteria, it comes to us. But still leaves the option open that if it's outside of those criteria, but there's another reason that the hearing officer still feels that we should hear it, that would do it. So it would be, it would, I guess, make the hearing officer's task perhaps a little bit more simplified. At least that's kind of where I'm thinking. So I apologize. When I was saying staff, I really was talking about the role of the hearing officer there.
Okay, yeah, that's something I think we ought to talk more about, and maybe even in an executive session, just because that's kind of a very different question. In other words, what the commission did was do a pretty simple procedural standing order. Now I think, just off the top of my head, what we're thinking about is actually, kind of amending Rule 503H to say anything that meets these criteria will not automatically go to a hearing officer. I mean, it's sort of a weird procedural thing, just in the sense that there's still some discretion on the part of staff to say, well, it meets this criteria, but we're still not going to file the motion. I think a larger, or I think an ongoing conversation makes some sense here, rather than the commission just issuing kind of an amended standing order with some criteria. I hope I'm making some sense.
Yeah, well, Kyle, I think you're making sense. And frankly, I've come around to Messner's way of thinking that my attempt to uncumbersome something that is cumbersome didn't really work. And frankly, maybe we should just undo everything that I was trying to do. But ultimately, I think at the end of the day, maybe what we need to do is try all of this out for size, and then potentially go back and revamp the rule to figure out when we want stuff to be elevated to us, when we want stuff to be remained at the hearing officer level, et cetera, which is, I think, where you were going with it, Kyle. And I think I interrupted Messner as well. So John, go ahead.
Well, I think a couple of things. One is, I do appreciate the attempt at efficiency here, because I do think when we're dealing with these topics that an efficient review process is important for both the operator as well as the COGCC in trying to resolve these issues. I think one of the motivating factors for me, as far as immediately elevating it, is that we have the ability to expedite the process in order to be able to come to a conclusion on what are potentially issues that need to be addressed in a timely fashion. I also think that any commission, not just this commission, so I'm not picking on this commission, including myself, but staff has the ability to determine or look at what's going on with a particular NOAV or incident and say, we can do all this work at the hearing officer level or at the staff level, and then go to, and then send it up on a consent agenda or as a recommended order. But this commission is going to have a million different questions, and it's possible that this is actually going to go into an additional hearing as well, which is not an efficient process. So I'm comfortable with kind of the way that it's going, which is staff reading the tea leaves, knowing the characters on this commission and what we're going to have questions about and what we're not going to have questions about. And if it looks like there may be a situation that inevitably they're going to come to some conclusion at the staff or hearing officer level, but when it comes to us, it's going to be another long process in order to get it ultimately resolved, that it just go to us. And I think that's one of the things that's being addressed here. And so whether that means we have a standing order that sends it up, or whether we continue with what has been done for the previous two situations, I'm comfortable with both of those. But I really think it's an attempt to give us a voice, but at the same time, not give us a voice at the expense of drawing out a process that probably needs to be a very efficient process for both public health, safety, welfare, the environment, wildlife resources, from a staff level, from an operator level. So that's what I'm thinking.
And could I just add that just because commissioners have questions on some of the consent agenda items that have come forth, that doesn't mean for me that it necessarily needed to come to the commission. I think it's okay for us to ask questions, and we've, to date, I don't think have overturned anything. And it's just that sometimes I have some questions after I've read the finding or what the agreement has been made, and I just have some questions, and it doesn't mean that I think that it should have come to us. And so I guess my concern was, I don't think that everything should be coming to the commission, and just because we've been asking questions doesn't mean that I think it should have come to the commission. It just means that I had some questions. And so my concern was kind of like, how do we figure out this balance and what's going to come to us and what isn't. So I'm comfortable with the way that it has happened so far, and the things that staff has said. We think you need to dip into this one because you're going to have a lot of questions, not just a simple like, hey, can you explain to me, you know, this violation or this background. They've been, thus far, the two things that have been sent forth, I think, are pretty complex and complicated, and warrant maybe a discussion with the commission. So I just wanted to chime in on that piece.
Can I, Jeff?
Yeah, Julie.
That's really helpful context, Karen. And I think that I use the term commissioners had questions when what I meant to say is we're figuring out how to do this for the first time, right? How to have professional commissioners. And for me, it's making sure that you all have the right information at the right time to make the right decision for Colorado, right? And there's some instances where, you know, I refer back to how it has been and then think, wait a minute, why did I do it this way? We should be doing it in a different way, recognizing this organizational change. And to me, you know, sometimes I worry that questions do mean that we didn't get enough information to you on the front end. And so bear with me as I'm also trying to learn through the process, because ultimately I want the 5 of you to have the information to make this a successful outcome. And what we need to do in the first year or years probably is different from what we need in year 5.
Mm-hmm.
But that is an excellent point, Karen, by the way.
And just, you know, I'm just by nature a pretty curious person, so it's not meant to be a criticism of staff or how they came to an agreement or how they worked with an operator. I'm just in general, a curious person as to how sometimes things have unfolded.
And just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting any one of us or picking any one of us out. I mean, I do think that we all ask questions, and important questions, including myself. And that's why I'm comfortable just having it come up to us, because then I feel I have the ability to ask all the questions I want, because I'm actually reviewing it and I can actually get the necessary information in front of me in order to be able, without having to have staff read the tea leaves, I can just get the information in front of me that I feel is necessary to make the decisions.
So where does that leave us? Are we comfortable kind of leaving it as is for now, and then maybe revisiting in a couple of months and sort of see how things shake out? I'll rephrase it. I'm comfortable leaving it as is, see how things shake out for the next couple of months, and then kind of revisit. As Julie, as you say, I think, you know, where we are now versus where we are in a year versus where we are in 3 years, it's probably going to change.
And Julie, maybe this conversation helped kind of put some things in front of you for food for thought for kind of what some of us as commissioners are concerned about or what we're thinking.
Yep, it did. Thank you. And we'll keep working through it, right? That's the best part of this group of the 5.
Yeah, and you know, I'm comfortable with it as well. I was trying to think of it more in terms of, you know, how could we maybe even increase efficiency or make it more simplified if we had like some things that we had to meet. But I think based on what Kyle offered, which was, you know, just my lack of understanding of, you know, kind of some of these processes or continuing gaining of understanding, you know, that makes sense that if we're establishing that, we may have to actually modify a rule. And so we just maybe should just proceed now and see if that is something that we want to do at some point. So I'm good with that.
Okay. On other matters, Julie, I think we heard a little bit the other day, and I would throw out just as an idea that perhaps an informational docket around water and water use and where water comes from and where it goes and amounts and produced water and recycling of water, all of that would really be, I think, a helpful topic for us. I think one of us could probably raise their hand and try to organize that, maybe working with some of our engineers, et cetera. And I don't know if anybody's got a passionate thought about trying to get that organized. I do not want it to be you, Julie, but to the other commissioners that are listening in or looking in, is that something you want to hear about? Does that sound like a positive idea?
I am very sorry, Jeff. I had to step away for just a second. Could you remind me what we're talking about?
We established the first issue on the standing order. We're just going to kind of leave it as is. Julie basically got some direction from us, and so we'll revisit in a few months. I then raised the topic of potentially having one of us organize an informational docket around water and water use and produced water and where the water comes from and how much water is being used and whether it's recycled and all that kind of stuff. So that was really where I was, is just to try to get some sense from other commissioners if that's an informational docket idea that sounds useful for us.
I think that's one that's been on our list for a little while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shows you how much I look at the list. So.
Well, I was just going to say, I think we may want to just take another look at that. I went through when we talked about it a few work sessions ago and re-ranked the remaining ones. But yeah, I think that was definitely one of the ones that I think would be useful.
Yeah, I think we had a couple of different water things on there.
HITS was another one. Was more.
Yeah, well, one was like operational use, produced water, just kind of water in general. One was kind of water law and how water rights affect any kind of potential utilization of produced water or operational water. And then I think a final one, and I'm trying to look here to see if I'm accurate here, but I think a final one was kind of potential technologies or new thoughts around how water could be utilized. I mean, I think the PITS one is there as well for sure. But if there was ways to or technologies that are going to come online in the future potentially that would allow for using recycled or produced water in ways that was perhaps not available to folks today, whether that's cleaning it or whatever that may be. And to your point, I mean, I'm happy to jump on that and see if I can't put something together, Jeff or Priya, if that's something you want to do. I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but and I know that the issues around water are very different in different parts of the state, and so that will actually end up being a big topic as well.
Yeah, no, John, I'm happy to have you lead, and I'm happy to help if there's a way I can help out with that. But
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Why don't, John, you take lead, and Priya, you step in and support, and let's get that set up and organized. And that sounds great. And it's a multifaceted topic, and maybe it's multi-hearings in which we have some lessons around some of those issues.
Sorry, I had to jump off. Is there an opportunity for us maybe to also, because it's a pretty important and big topic, I think there's kind of the viewpoint of an operator and how water is used or reused. But I think there's an opportunity for us to bring in other expertise. So for example, I'm wondering if the state engineer would be an important person to have as part of the conversation of water use, water rights, how it relates to the oil and gas industry, how much is being used by that industry versus other uses in Colorado. And I don't know if there are some other, I mean, I know there's lots of water law experts, but there might be an opportunity for us to bring in some different viewpoints and bring some other folks to the table.
I think that sounds good. And John, I'd suggest reach out to Scott, who was with the state engineer's office for a long period of time. And can probably bring some perspective as well. And I see Sean just showed up, so I'm sure he's got something to pipe in as well.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I kind of missed the timing of when you're hoping for this water discussion, but just a heads up, on August 16th, the afternoon, the Water Quality Control Division has meeting with COGCC staff on Senate Bill 89-181 to talk about water resources and how our agencies coordinate. So I'm not sure if that might sync up with the timing you're all thinking for this water session you're discussing now.
Yeah, that may actually, I mean, a timing standpoint, probably be in the range of that for sure. And I do think CWCB and engineer's office and CDPHE, you know, from kind of a state perspective, you know, I think that there's, you know, nonprofits out there that can provide some insight. I think there's, you know, individual engineering firms. I think that there's operators. I mean, I do think there's a gamut of folks that would be interested to chat about this topic. And I think what I'll do is maybe just put some feelers out to different folks and then come back to you all with some ideas, and then we'll try to refine it before we calendar anything. Does that seem fair?
That sounds good. And John, I know there's some scientific studies out there on some of the different like industry uses. You know, for example, like the cannabis industry also uses quite a bit of water, but I don't know what the relative, you know, relationships are between the different industries. And so it would be good to have some of that perhaps, or somebody that could summarize, you know, what's out there. But yeah, I mean, maybe we can start outlining it and I can try to look for some of that information.
Sure.
Hey, Sean, on that August 16th meeting, is that public?
It's not. It's just a staff level meeting, and I know there's some precedent for other similar interagency coordination meetings to have commissioners attend those. They're not open to the members of the public, but if there's an interest in maybe sending a commissioner designee to listen in on that, let me know, and I can kind of run that by the water division staff who's organizing that.
Yeah, I think it would probably be helpful to have one of us sit in and listen in. So why don't you do that and let me know, and we'll designate one of us to listen in.
Will do.
I'll volunteer if nobody else is interested, or if somebody else is interested, then we'll arm wrestle for it.
It's all you, Karen. That sounds great. What else for the good of the cause this morning?
I've got another scheduling thing. And this is just throwing it out there. A few meetings ago, we had talked about doing the kind of Western Slope tour. And, you know, I had said that I would help kind of wrangle that. And so now that things have started to open up and it looks like that may be a feasible possibility, I mean, I certainly want to coordinate with staff and Mimi and try to figure out how this will all work and what the needs are. But I think one of the challenges just in initially looking at it was looking at calendars and trying to determine when this would even be feasible, as far as us being able to all attend this. Let's say that it's a 4-day tour, and looking at the calendar, I mean, August is pretty much not possible. September is not possible. October is a maybe, like 25th to the 28th, that kind of that week, or 26th to the 29th, something like that. So that's possible. And then November is not looking very good either. So I guess I was just looking for thoughts as far as timing goes, and whether you felt like October was, that third week in October was a good week to start looking or thinking about things. Initially I was thinking November, but with Thanksgiving there and different vacations there, I'm not seeing a window in November.
In that latter part of October is still somewhat tentatively set aside for rulemaking?
I'm looking at the rulemaking. Well, the rulemaking that's set up right now is 20th to the 22nd. and then the 8th is what's on my calendar at least. And so the only. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, this is Mimi. I was just going to say, and forgive me if the meeting invite didn't get to you yet, but we do have the financial assurance rulemaking also set aside for October 26th, 27th, and 28th. Yeah, ending on the 28th.
Okay, so October does not look good either. So I guess I'm not sure. I guess I'm not exactly sure how to proceed on that one. Maybe the first week of November is feasible.
Julie's out the first week of November, and
I've been to the West Slope.
all I throw out is we may want, after a rigorous and robust financial assurances rulemaking, not schedule something for immediately thereafter, and not to not schedule something. I'm just throwing it out there.
How about later in well, not late in September, but like the 3rd week in September? The weather might be a little bit nicer than November too then.
So 3rd week in September, we do have the initial financial. I've got a financial assurance thing on there on the 22nd.
I have one on the 29th. So I feel like we're all over the place as far as, then maybe I don't understand the dates for things, but I have the 29th on my calendar. Maybe that's outdated.
No, there's definitely the 29th as well, but there was another one on the 22nd.
22nd is a staff presentation.
Right. We have both.
Mhm.
And our thinking has been to try to have staff give its presentation, allow time for that to sink in, parties to think about it, and then come back the following week and give their presentations with the benefit of kind of, hearing from staff and hearing commissioner questions. So that's why we staged that kind of 21. We asked parties to hold the 21st and 22nd, and then that last half of the week in September, and then the following week in October, if things carry over. I mean, we booked a lot of time out for financial assurance, not knowing how many parties we would have. We now know that we have 92 or 93 parties signed up for financial assurance. And so we have our first pre-hearing conference at 11 o'clock today to start kind of trying to work through what does that mean for presentation time, and how do we do this well. So at some point, maybe we'll be able to focus those dates better. And I mean, in part for the benefit of our stakeholders and folks who are holding all this time as well. But again, my suggestion would be to hold on to those dates for now. And maybe those first couple of weeks of November are the biggest chunks of time that I see also.
So maybe I'll just leave it there right now, and we can think about it. But I was just trying to figure out just a general 4 days there. I guess the other 4 days that are possible now that I'm looking at this would be like the 14th to the 17th of September as well.
Yep.
I'm open to that. I'm also open to I appreciate the, desire for a break after, but I think I do feel like these regional visits are important, and I would be open to scheduling something after the financial assurance hearings that week after.
Yep, agreed. It'll be a different type of work, so it'll be a little bit change of pace of what we're doing. So I'm very comfortable with doing that kind of right after the financial assurance rulemaking. I like that first week in November. I personally would like to get out and see operations, see the landscape, see the community before the snow's on the ground. I know that, it kind of varies every year, but something to think about. So kind of the earlier in the year we could do it, the better. And, just as one commissioner, that first week of November works for me.
And it sounds like you have plenty of scheduling issues to work with. So sorry to throw another wrench, but I am curious if anyone is aware of or plans on attending the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission's annual meeting, which will be that first week of November, I think November 7th through 9th in Santa Fe. I think this issue you're talking about probably is a higher priority, but just wanted to kind of flag that for folks in case Director Murphy or Chair Robbins might potentially be interested in attending that IOGCC conference.
Thanks for throwing that back out there, Sean. Yeah. Well, John, why don't you try to work with that first week of November, which would not be the IOGCC, but like the 1st through the 5th, and see where we can go from there.
Okay.
Okay, as I mentioned, we've got about 24 more minutes before this is going to turn into the financial assurance Zoom meeting. So other topics for ourselves this morning?
I just had one quick update that I've started to engage with Mike Leonard on one of the work groups that we assigned in the S&P during our mission change rulemaking for noise, and so we're going to get that rolling. We've already also had some conversations related to the work group and consideration of a mineral owner registry, and so we're considering matters in that regard as well. But those are a couple things that are on my plate, and just thought I'd share with everyone. Right now, with regards to the noise stuff, I'm knee deep in literature, reading very insomnia curing literature on noise, but getting there. So just wanted to give a quick little update on something that I'm working on.
That's great. Bill, is that group just with staff primarily and some of the industry folks, or is it a broader stakeholder working group?
We haven't created a working group just yet. So right now we're kind of scoping what we're trying to accomplish in that regard. So Mike has been the noise expert on staff and has sent me a bunch of literature to work through. Then he and I are going to circle back. We're going to start identifying potential people to engage with us on noise and on guidance associated with noise, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. And relatedly, I've now made a lot of progress on the biological resources working group. I know a couple of you had expressed interest in participating in some way. What the plan is now is to have kind of a core group of 10 or 12 people that include the operators, experts, subject matter experts, and CPW staff and COGCC staff. And so, but then we also are planning to have kind of a broader group of folks that would maybe have opportunity to provide feedback and possibly also some listening sessions, either on a regional basis or, with certain kind of groups of folks like local governments and, other stakeholders, so that we can make sure that we're engaging, a broad group of folks before we create the report that comes back to the commission. So that's working through, and I've got almost all the names for the sort of core group set up, and a bunch of names so far for the larger group. But as we all know, if any of you want to serve on that core group, then we would need to notice and make the hearings public. And so I think. I just wanted to open that up. I'm still open to that if others want to be on the team, but if not, then I can just include you in that larger group, which will probably be primarily handled via email.
Good to me.
Larger group's probably going to make life easier for everybody, so I'm good with being on your general list.
Okay. And if anybody has any suggestions for people that might, for that larger group especially, I'm open to that being a pretty broad group. Happy to get names from you. The other working group, which is the riparian areas technical working group, in talking with Julie, and Julie chime in or correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but this is just a group between COGCC staff and CPW staff, and I'm just going to be kind of helping facilitate that conversation. And we don't have a time limit in the SBP on that specifically, so that'll probably take place a little bit later on. But just wanted to give you a quick update on that. And I did already get some names from CPW for that group, so working through that. And I got names from CPW for the biological resources working group as well.
kind of just had a random item that's not really relevant to anything we've been discussing, but wanted to make sure wanted to float this by commissioners. Some of you might know that I'm on the board of directors for a nonprofit organization called Stronger, which stands for State Review of Oil and Natural Gas Environmental Regulations. It's kind of similar to SOGR. It's a multi-stakeholder group that consists of equal representatives from the nonprofit community, the environmental community, state governments, and industry. They develop guidelines to assess state environmental oil and gas programs against, and they make recommendations for improving state programs. I'm actually kind of having a hard time keeping up with my work duties and don't really know that I have much time for extracurricular activities like this. So I am looking for a replacement, someone to replace me on that board of directors. So if anyone's interested in learning more about that organization, or if you have any colleagues in state government that you might be interested in nominating to serve on that board, their website is strongerinc.org. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about that, and I can connect you with their executive director.
Great. Thanks, Sean. I'll take a look at that website.
I've got one other thing, and I know that we're going to get a legislative update at some point here in the future. But seeing now that there's on the federal level, that there's the Lujan bill that's out there, and then there's now Bennett has reintroduced his bill. And both of these potentially do have ramifications to our financial assurance rulemaking, or some influence to our financial assurances rulemaking, potentially. I guess I'm curious how we would get briefed on that, or whether that would be part of the rulemaking process, or I'm trying to understand how this is going to tie into what we're doing over the next couple of months, understanding that these bills may or may not actually get through anything, period, or if they did get through things, it still could be some time out. So thoughts on that?
John, I mean, I'm kind of in where you are, which is continuing to watch it, knowing that it's out there, hoping that it comes through, I think. But I don't know how to, I mean, I don't know if Bennett's folks want to come individually talk about it. I don't know how to really integrate with the federal process and kind of our formal commission process either. But it is something that I'm watching closely. And sorry, there's like a fly right by my head, so I look like a lunatic right now. But I sometimes miss conference calls instead of video calls. But like I said, yeah, I think we all need to be aware of it. But until we get a vote, it's hard to know what to do except to continue as though there is no action. That's been my approach on this. And then when we get a vote, hopefully we can adjust course in a positive way.
So I think I'm hearing we just keep it on our radar screens and adjust if necessary and when necessary. Because John, I don't think that we've got so like Alice, who is DNR's legislative liaison, is responsible for keeping us informed about what's happening at the state legislature, but I don't think her job involves monitoring the Fed, legislative issues. So I don't know that we've got something there other than you and I and others just kind of keeping our eye on that.
Well, maybe what could be helpful then is maybe I'll do a little homework and just compile a memo or something that, or a report at an upcoming meeting, at least talking broadly about what's in these bills, so that we're all somewhat aware of those at an equal level, and then go from there. Agreed with Julie that until these things get passed, and understanding that they could get modified 35 different times, in the next few months or years, if they ever do get through the process. I don't know as we can react to it right now, but
Yeah. What else? Okay, I'm not seeing anything further from anybody, which is about right, because that'll give us a chance to take a quick break before we listen into Financial Assurance's initial pre-hearing conference that starts up in 14 minutes on this very same Zoom channel. That's right, correct, Mimi?
Yes, it's on this same Zoom account. So the credentials to log in are actually different than this meeting. And I can recirculate that to commissioners if it's not in your calendar, but it's on the same Zoom account.
Okay, why don't you recirculate that? That'll be easy. And then
Sure.
we can all hop back in about 13 minutes or so and
Sounds
listen to the 93-member Financial Assurance's initial pre-hearing conference.
Great.
Great. See everybody in a few.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.